Hello, everybody, and welcome to Navigating Remote Medical Admin, Embracing the Future of the Medical Office. This session is a little bit different than our normal sessions that we've been hosting in the last year, and it's come out of conversation that we've had with multiple clients of ours that are in the medical space. And what have they seen relative to adapting, or what are they considering relative to adapting to, the future of their office space, and what that might mean to them and their organization. So we've had several conversations about that with different folks in the medical industry, and we're hoping to share that with you today to give you some insight, not to tell you how to run your organization for your medical practice by any means, however, to just talk about some of the challenges that we see in some research that we've done, and hopefully some solutions that can actually help you maybe address or work towards this solving this problem. So the little bit of the agenda today, again, we're going to talk a little bit about the core problems and opportunities, as well as then address some of the technical challenges. But we're not just going to leave you hanging with the technical challenges. We're actually going to give you some solutions that you could we believe, if this is a problem you're trying to solve, here are some solutions that you could consider in order to solve those problems. We have some tips and recommended actions at the end, a summary, and then of course open it up for questions. But by any means, throughout the entire session, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A panel and go ahead and post to the Q&A panel, and we will either answer them offline or at the end. And by the way, I'm Nate with Mytech. I'll be your facilitator presenter today, and Stephanie is producing behind the scenes. So thank you, Stephanie, for your help. Okay. Real quick, before we get going into everything, I always like to say just 1 minute about Mytech. We are a business and technology consulting organization that works with small and medium businesses. One of the things that we've learned is, even though we're all in different practices and we're talking to the medical industry today, we've learned that we have a proven IT strategy that we know can achieve consistent, reliable results for our clients. They usually like that, which does remove IT challenges, so that ultimately you can focus on serving your clients or your customers, or in this case, your patients, better, and hopefully be more adaptable to other business challenges, such as adapting to remote work. By collaborating with our clients and adopting our shared IT strategy, we know our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, by all means, please raise your hand. But I know that's not why you're here today, so let's dig in to the content. All right. So today, again, we're going to start with talking about, well, what is the remote medical admin business opportunity? Again, I'm not trying to tell you how to run your organization, but this is some feedback and notes that we've taken from conversations with our existing, some of our existing clients, as well as some research that we've done relative to the medical space. So I'll summarize some of those, some of the business opportunity and the challenges here, and we'll have a few more slides on this too. First and foremost, there's some research that, and if you're in the medical space, you know this, but medical ready space is 2 to 5 times more expensive to build out than regular commercial space. So that's just a challenge to say that, well, if you're building out medical space, you really need to optimize it. So take advantage of every opportunity to optimize that square footage. The other challenge that is that's a report that was done is that there is a quote says, while 30 million new square feet of medical space will be created in 2021, the demand is still projected to outpace supply. The medical industry is one that's not going away. It's expanding, it's growing, and that's one of the challenges that if you have space, there's demand for the space. And so again, another reason to try and optimize what you have versus just trying to go out and get more. So here then is the opportunity to potentially convert office space, admin office space, potentially into other usable space that might allow you to optimize it a little bit differently than what you have historically. One of the other opportunities that we heard from our clients is that the job market is tough, no matter where you are. However, if you might be able to expand your search outside of your local metro geography or traditional geography that you've searched or sourced your team, that there may be an opportunity to find great talent, but that's not restricted to your geographic area. Again, we all know that finding great talent and good fit for your team is difficult and challenging, and this might be a way in which you can expand that and open up the pool of available team members. Then here are some of the challenges that of course creates. Now, if you're not in person, onboarding and training and ongoing supervision of these team members that are remote it poses a different challenge. Not that, because managing, supervising, and onboarding and training existing team members, whether they're in the office, still is challenging. It's not easy. However, it just poses the different challenges that you need to be intentional about. And so some of this stuff we're going to talk about today and solutions we're going to talk about today. Stuff is the technical word, by the way. Some of the solutions we're going to talk about today will help you in addressing that and engaging your team remotely. And then finally, there are some technology challenges to implementing this, to making it convenient and easy and optimal for your remote team members. And so we're going to talk about some of those challenges and hit them head on with some specific solutions that you could consider as you're building out your plan for a potential remote medical admin team. All right, so one of the options you have that we talked about is optimizing your space. So you can convert existing admin space to patient space. So what does that look like? Well, it's not just one type of space. It could be telehealth space, where maybe you have a room that's just optimized and set up for telehealth sessions, if that's something that your practice has adopted. Maybe add different treatment rooms or just regular check-in rooms for patients. One of the other, depending on your practice and depending on the services you provide, maybe you have physical therapy rooms where maybe they're a little bit different, and maybe you can expand some of those rooms or capacity. And finally, if you have, again, this is not finally the only, these are just 4 examples, and there's probably more, I'm sure, depending on the different practices that exist in your practice, but an operatory room. Do you need more operatory space for your existing practice? Again, the idea is that with the expense of medical space and the demand outpacing the supply of medical space, here's an opportunity to be able to consider converting your existing space into patient space. However, one of the things that I do want to note is that in order to potentially facilitate your remote team, you might consider, when you're building out your plan and thinking about your plan to potentially convert existing space, that you might want to create some space to either convert maybe an existing like a small conference room into like a huddle room that might be leveraging something like Teams rooms. So think about that so that you can engage your remote team differently or better, or hotel stations where you might be able to set up stations that have standardized technology and standardized equipment, so that if someone that is a remote team member comes in, they can just plug in their laptop and connect to everything in your environment, as well as multiple external monitors, keyboard, mouse, headset, etc. So those are some things to consider as far as of your existing space. Are you taking an existing conference room or small conference room or huddle space, or do you need to convert maybe some admin space to facilitate something like that, or to facilitate a hotel station? Just something to consider as opposed to an all or none, no admin space versus all patient serving space. That might be something to consider. Again, we'll talk about that technology a little bit later. Now, from a business perspective, what does that offer us the opportunity to do? Again, I'm not trying to tell anybody listening from a medical perspective on how to run your organization, but here's some of the feedback we received from talking to a few of our medical clients, is that, often one of the metrics that is used in one of the practices we discussed is the relative value unit, or the RVU rate or ratio. And one of the things that is, it's a combination of the revenue and the services provided and the cost to deliver those services. And so one of the things of increasing patient service capacity by converting some admin space to usable patient serving space is that you can actually keep your costs lower while able to generate more revenue on the high end and more services on the top end too. So from a business perspective, hopefully that optimizes your resources, your space, and your team. The other opportunity that is similar, but it's just another way of looking at it. One of our other practices that we talked to mentioned how they look at it from how many patients per hour can they see, and that sometimes that depends on the type of service being provided. So for example, they might allocate a ratio of 2 patients per hour if it's a new patient check-in or a new patient kind of consultation, versus they might allocate 3 or 4 patients per hour for just like a regular routine check-in, just to see and check up to see how people are doing. So you might be able to increase the number of patients per hour that you're able to serve by expanding some of that capacity. Now, some of that capacity might warrant or might give the opportunity to hire an additional or and additional providers to be able to serve more patients. Depending on how your team's capacity is today, that might be something to consider. But of course, if you add more providers and you have more capacity to serve more patients, that also affords you the ability to increase. Again, it all depends on your practice and where you're at. Another one of the pieces of feedback that one of our clients mentioned is that maybe you can stagger shifts. They did admit that this wasn't necessarily a popular decision, but one of the things that they were trying to consider to optimize their existing space, and if you hire these additional providers, if that capacity creates the opportunity to hire additional providers, it might create additional flexibility to accommodate staggered shifts, so that you might be able to serve clients from earlier in the morning to later in the evening, but not burning your team out. So all of the above, depending on how you look at it and depending on how your practice might adapt to increase patient service capacity, gives you the opportunity to serve more patients, generate more revenue, but hopefully optimize and minimize your costs, your increased costs as you go along. So those are the business opportunities and challenges that we discussed with our, again, some of our medical clients and some of the research that we conducted relative to medical space. So now let's talk about some of the challenges, the technology challenges that this poses, but also some of the solutions that we can that you can consider to address some of those challenges. All right, without further ado, here we go. Not a fully exhaustive list, but I figured these are some of the top ones that you might face if you as a medical organization, or if you have a medical practice inside your organization. Like we know a lot of nonprofit organizations that have a medical division, or a part of their practice involves servicing people's health. And so it's not always just a medical practice. But anyway, this is the kind of the short list, if you will, of some of the common challenges that we have seen and that we expect that you might have if you're considering a remote admin team. So first of all, if this is going to be a more permanent solution versus just the temporary nature of the pandemic that we've all been through recently, deploying home office staff or home office equipment to remote staff. That could depend, as we'll touch on next, the geographic location. Is it a drive away, or is it a flight away, or is it such a long drive away that you wouldn't want to go in person? So anyway, we'll talk about that. But then the security of remote team members. Now, we all adapted to the pandemic and worked from home, or at least a lot of us did. So, but that does change your security posture. It changes your risk footprint. It changes how you need to address and look at security. So at the very least, we'll talk about that and what that might mean to you. It also changes, again, it's not necessarily that it's easy, that doing managing or collaborating with people internally is easy, but it changes your collaboration when you might have some people in the office and some people remote now versus all remote or all in the office. So we'll talk a little bit about team collaboration and how supervision could be built into that. Phone systems. That was one of the biggest challenges we heard from our clients as they've shifted to remote work over the last year and a half, and now coming back, is that how does your phone system work with that? How does maybe something like voice over IP, and how do you work with transferring calls at home, or how do people dial out from home but yet not be on their mobile but from their corporate phone number? Then, as well as connecting to software systems and making sure that's secure, your EMRs or EHR solutions or practice management solutions. Then access to files, something as simple as just Word documents, templates, PDFs, things like that the organization uses on a daily basis. Speed of VPN, if you need a VPN to access that, which oftentimes you do, or at least a VPN to maybe a remote desktop connection or something like that, how do you address that? Or is that something that can be solved or done differently through a remote access solution? And the other one that's an interesting one, doesn't come up very often, but how do you make sure that the remote team member, isn't using a personal computer? Talk about a potential significant HIPAA risk, because that personal computer is not secured, not updated. You don't know what's on it. You don't want it accessing your corporate resources. So trying to make sure that you can restrict or limit or block the use of a personal computer with your devices. So this is a high level of the challenges, and now let's dig in and start talking about some of the solutions that you can look forward to. So, okay. Again, remote home office deployment. One of the things, there's a few different variables here that we look at. Again, the geographic footprint. Can you drive there? Is it someone where your team member might drive into the office to pick up equipment? Or are they outside of the state? Or is it a long distance drive where you're going to be drop shipping equipment to them? That might change the dynamic of how you bring those people into the office or not for training or onboarding, or how you maybe occasionally have them come to the office for meetings. Of course, there's business implications too. If they're outside of the state and you don't have any footprint there, are they a 1099 contractor, or are they a W-2 employee? Because there's tax implications as far as filing taxes in the state with that. Anyway, those are some of the business challenges. But thinking through these things relative to how you want to do this affects the technical solution as far as training or onboarding, et cetera. One of the things that if they are within proximity, this new team member that might be a remote admin staff, if they are within proximity, one of the things to consider is that one of those hotel stations that we talked about could be very beneficial in the initial training and onboarding. Have them come to the office, have them work from the office for whatever period of time makes sense, and then they could be plugged into a very similar setup that then when they go back to their home office, they now are able to then use the technology in a very similar way because it's designed the same, it's standardized equipment, et cetera. The other challenge is deploying applications and user profiles. One of the things that IT folks have used for a long time is that the local server that's in your office, or maybe it's in the cloud, has policies that can be deployed to help manage that machine. Well, when that machine is not on the network or not connected to the VPN, it's more challenging and difficult to do that. But there's some newer solutions and new technologies that are out there through Microsoft's cloud that allow a different way of doing that or solving that problem. In a public service announcement, it does require additional licensing, but that's definitely something that we have seen as an advantage and a capability where you can do a little bit more upfront work to say, these are the applications, these are the solutions that this person needs, and you basically align it to their profile, and then you send the equipment out to them. When they log in for the first time, basically all the information that they need shows up, and the creation of their profile is much easier. So there's some technology there that really can help with that, and that does require some additional Microsoft licensing through their cloud platform. The Microsoft 365 suite could be is that cloud platform to which I'm referring. But here's some of the challenges. Like that is these problems can be solved, but it also depends on some of the variables of how you choose to potentially implement your remote admin team. Now, one of the other things that we suggest is having a home office checklist, meaning don't ignore or don't, and you can customize this checklist to whatever you need. However, ideally we recommend having a similar or same configuration as if they're working in the office. Like if you have a hotel station, for example, where you have multiple external monitors, a headset, an external keyboard and mouse, and you just plug in your laptop to that, then try and emulate that same kind of experience at the home office so that your team member can be just as productive with the equipment at home as they can be when they're in the office. Again, we highly recommend that it's a corporate provided and owned and managed device. So that's something that's, I just didn't want to assume that. Multiple monitors, but also, you're in the medical industry. If they're a remote admin, make sure they have a quiet location that has some privacy and is free from distractions so that you can feel that your information is being kept confidential and adhering to security and privacy practices. Also, if they're ever going to interact either with your internal team or with external patients or vendors, make sure there's decent lighting for video calls or conferencing, that's something that's a possibility. Quality, reliable internet connectivity. Just kind of check this off, let alone whether or not you as an organization plan on maybe contributing as a reimbursement to internet connectivity for your remote team member, but just considering that that's something that you want to kind of double check or make sure that there's a minimum level that's acceptable based on what that person's going to be doing. Also consider a headset, like what I'm wearing today. It's much more convenient for me to be able to use a headset, and it's a much better experience for the people with whom I communicate when I'm doing video conferencing or video calls. So that's something that can easily be provided. Or if you have a soft phone via your voice over IP provider, and that could be also on the mobile device as well as on someone's laptop. And then, it sounds kind of silly, but have a comfortable chair if they're expected to be productive and enjoy their environment. And now whether or not you pay for that chair or not is totally up to you and your organization. But something that basically making sure that your remote team member has a space that's conducive to being in a productive environment that can be an enjoyable experience for them and productive result for you. So anyway, that's a little bit of a home checklist that I thought we'd put together to kind of give you an example of what we're talking about. So let's talk about the security posture. As I mentioned earlier, your team, this changes your security posture. Now, this all happened during the pandemic too, but if you're looking at this as a more of a long-term strategic direction, it also warrants considering and looking at your security posture. And one of the things that I would highly recommend if you're not already doing, in fact, there's a couple other variables that they'll throw out little tidbits, but multi-factor authentication. Leverage single sign-on, which means that the one username and password that your organization uses to log in can be applied to nearly every, not every solution can integrate with it, but nearly every application or provider that you have. If you can employ that, you can also employ things like conditional access, making sure that maybe your team member, if they're on a VPN and they're logging in to your file server, it's fine. But if they're trying to log into a third-party access, it requires, like your EMR, it requires multi-factor authentication. So that's what conditional access means. Or if they try and log in with their personal device to your EMR, it won't let them do it. There's things like that you can do with conditional access. The other thing that I would say is that there's data that we got from Travelers Insurance that it illustrates that 99.9% of breaches or like hacks, if they're based on account credentials, can be stopped by turning on multi-factor authentication. 99.9%. Additionally, a little tip: if you are currently, or whenever your cyber insurance policy renews, or if you're considering going after a cyber insurance policy, what we've been hearing in the last several months is that cyber insurance will not even underwrite your organization unless you have multi-factor authentication enabled and turned on. So that's a strong consideration for remote folks, but also for your organization, regardless of whether or not you have remote team members. Again, preventing personal devices from connecting, making sure, especially if there's a VPN in use, because if a personal device connects to your VPN, whatever junk, whatever malware, whatever bad stuff is on that personal device could come right across your network into your environment. So definitely want to make sure that you're preventing personal device access, which is why you want to provide a corporate device to the remote team member. And you want to prevent that not only by written policy, so make sure that's part of your written policy, but also have a technology policy that can employ it, like conditional access, like I mentioned, that can help reinforce that written rule. Finally, again, as I mentioned, your home offices are not behind your corporate firewall. So if you haven't changed the way in which you're protecting your environment in the last few years, it's time to review. You need layers beyond just your traditional antivirus. And I'm not going to go into the details of these, but just to give you an example, is like DNS. It's kind of like a firewall that's not the corporate firewall. It's kind of like the managed detection and response. That's one of the tools. It's a relatively new tool out in the last several years, but it's basically presuming that you're going to get breached, and it seeks out and hunts down the threats that get past your antivirus, that get past your firewall, that get past your DNS, the stuff that if somebody accidentally clicks on something, it gets through all that stuff. Something else needs to help find it. Well, that's what managed detection and response does, as well as security awareness training and phishing tests. If you're not doing those things today, you should consider doing those things, or look at your security posture and learn why those are important and necessary in today's security world. Because let's face it, in the last several years, security has changed. And so these are some of the things, if you're making a strategic change and direction, you should consider your security posture and what you should do to address those risks that are different. Another public service announcement is that there is additional licensing required for the multi-factor authentication, as I mentioned, that I talked about at the beginning of this slide. But also, if you combine that with some of the deployment tool licensing that I mentioned earlier, you actually can bundle that for some savings. So there's some individual licensing that you can buy if you're just doing one or the other. But if you're going to plan on doing both, there's actually some bundles that you can get that allow you to license both of those features at a lower cost. So that's just, again, a little public service announcement on that front. So now let's talk about another common issue that we see organizations going through right now, is if you your legacy file server or the file access when you're in the office and how you access your files. Now, if you've gone remote, that typically is required VPN access. And a lot of organizations that we've talked to, because they, this, I say legacy because they've had a file server for 20-ish or more years, and there's probably a bunch of, I don't want to call it junk, but I'll just call it archive data that probably isn't pertinent today or that maybe you need to keep, but your organization has evolved over the last 20 years too. So moving to cloud or SharePoint, potentially for file access, can allow you to redesign that structure to fit what your organization looks like today with this strategy in mind of trying to enable and make it easy for your remote team members. Additionally, it integrates with Teams if you're already using Teams, which could also be part of your phone system, which could also be part of video conferencing, could be part of your Huddle rooms. Leverages OneDrive that makes it easy for your team to access those files when they're accessing them from home, and it removes the need for a VPN. So that's one of the things that a lot of times I hear from folks is that, gosh, they just don't like that VPN. Moving down this path, and it can take some time and intentionality to do it, but this is one of the things that can really make it easy for your team to be able to access your local files, and you can adapt and allow your organization to adapt to a new design and the way this technology is designed to work moving forward. Again, I would also reference, we've done sessions on this, like file server to SharePoint migration, as well as another session that we called OneDrive, isn't that just SharePoint? So there's a couple sessions like that we've done that help. We'll go into this deeper if you're interested, which we'll send in either the chat or the follow-up. But I just like to mention this is a common thing that we're seeing from organizations as they're going down this path. One of the last couple items here before we adjourn is that considering huddle rooms or hotel space. Meaning that one of the challenges that we coming back to the office, which is typically not 100% back to the office, it's we were all in the office, in theory pre-pandemic, and then all remote. So we've been able to adapt to that. But what about when we're kind of remote and kind of in the office? So that's where a hybrid conference or huddle room space, if you optimize it with something like Teams rooms, where you can have content cameras to be able to share the whiteboard, as well as video displays to be able to really bring in the remote folks, and better audio quality for those conferences. So Teams rooms is one of those things. We just did a session on that a couple weeks ago. It's very cool. It's very easy to use. And if a huddle room space or something like that, or hybrid conference room space is something you're considering or need, give us a call. We can help you with that. It's pretty cool technology that makes it really easy for your team to collaborate with when you've got people in the office as well as remote. Hotel space, again, having spare desks or a desk or desks where you can have just, a docking station with standardized equipment for people to be able to plug in. If you've got that remote team that occasionally comes into the office, that's a great way to do that. Standardizing on laptops, standardizing on the docking station, plus either external keyboard, monitor, mouse, headset, etc. So it does take some planning and thought about that, but it's actually not that hard to do. So that's something that we'd highly recommend, because from a onboarding, training, supervisory, continuous engagement of your team, these two solutions will help you do that, help you as your supervisor or managers engage your team similarly as if they're in the office by using this technology. Lastly, before we go to the review, is communications internally and externally. One of the things we found is that a lot of organizations have adapted to using something like Teams for all internal communication, but what about external communication? So consider leveraging some sort of voice over IP technology. Teams Voice has that. But there are other third-party voice providers that also integrate with Teams. So if you're trying to use Teams, there's some solutions that integrate there. There are also soft phones for your laptop or mobile, so your team doesn't feel like they have to use their personal device or their personal phone number when they're calling out. You can use a soft phone, again, on your laptop or mobile to be able to make those calls, as well as in having like a headset for video or voice calls. And testing which ones make sense or what work best for your team. Some people like the over-the-ear like this. Some people like something that hangs on the ear, just a little bit of a headset. So again, it's personal preference. But communications is one of the big challenges that we heard from our clients, is that a lot of the technology worked great, but the voice was a real challenge. And so trying to adapt down this path is one of the challenges as well. The other public service announcement, if you go down the Teams Voice path, is that there is additional licensing to be able to enable Teams Voice, to be able to like dial a phone number from Teams versus just creating a video link. However, so there's extra licensing for that. However, if you, again, bundle the Teams Voice, bundle the multi-factor authentication, and bundle some of the tools to be able to do better automated and remote deployment and management, you actually can get some bundled pricing and bundled suites SKUs that actually save you some money. So that's kind of the final public service announcement relative to licensing of all these solutions. So in review, basically, look at the home office checklist. Don't ignore that, because making sure that there's a conducive environment at home is really critical for a successful remote admin team deployment. Make sure you're looking at multi-factor authentication and employing conditional access and single sign-on. This is a time to pause and reflect on the other aspects of your organization's security posture. This will change, especially if this is a strategic direction that you're going. This will change how the risks that your organization will face. And so it warrants a review of how you're going to address those risks moving forward. Again, I don't know if you're going to go down the path of file server to SharePoint migration, but that is one of the things that we have heard as people are trying to enable more remote work or more flexible work. That is one of the options to consider, as well as huddle rooms. Now we're in a hybrid world where some of us are in the office, some are out of the office. So some of those huddle rooms or hotel stations might be a good part of your office configuration plan moving forward. And then finally, considering what kind of communications might enable your team to work better together, like Teams Voice or some other voice over IP provider. So that's it. That's the summary. I want to say thank you for attending. Please follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We post all of our content there, and we even queue up sessions that are related to each other. Share these events with those who you think can benefit, the recording or otherwise. We appreciate that. And then join us for future events. We're about ready to publish all of our events for Q3, including our Power User Group sessions. We just had one last week, and we're scheduling 2 more out here in the coming months. So stay tuned for those as well. And thank you for your participation today. Thank you for attending. And I look forward to any questions that folks might have. So let's open it up for questions, Stephanie.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. We have a couple questions in here. The first one you kind of touched on, but just to be more direct, is it secure to access websites with confidential client information from corporate provided devices on their home Wi-Fi or internet connection?
Yeah, that is a really great question. There's no 100% secure methodology. One of the biggest, there's kind of 2 risks that you run in that scenario. There's probably more, but 2 off the top of my head, especially if they're using like the provided wireless access point from, let's say, a cable provider or other telecom provider, is that sometimes people could jump on those. So they might intercept some of the traffic. It really depends kind of who their neighbors are, because they have to be in proximity to that wireless signal in order to be able to do that. So that is a challenge. One of the other challenges is, and this is more to if you have a personal device doing that versus a corporate device, but it can happen on corporate devices too, is especially if you don't have some of the more advanced security variables and tool sets that I mentioned here, is that there could be like a keylogger on that device. That's more apt to happen on a personal device, but if you don't have some of those additional security tools, that could be on one of your corporate devices too. And so that could allow you to log keystrokes and login information to those critical sites. So having those additional tools and turning on multi-factor authentication will basically prevent a problem with that. So while the risk may still exist, having those other solutions in place will actually mitigate against that. So those are the 2 risks that still exist when you're working from home, again, because there's no totally secure environment, unless you wanted to put a firewall at everyone's house and a corporate wireless at everyone's house, which you could do. But in general, if you're using a corporate device that is being managed with proper security, with multi-factor authentication, and you're connecting to an encrypted site, right? There's the HTTPS, which nearly every site is today, or every application is today. Then it's a secure environment for sure. Again, with the asterisk that no environment's 100% secure. But hopefully that wasn't too much of an answer than what you're looking for.
Thanks, Nate. Another one here is more of a comment, but they're saying that they implemented a remote worker contract for the remote workers. They're wondering if anybody else has these type of contracts. If so, they'd be willing to share more details about what they include in their contract, and they'd be willing to share theirs. I'm not sure if you've had interaction with others that we have examples of that, or.
That's thanks for the comment. I know it wasn't really a question, but this is one of the things that organizations are struggling with. Even our organization, we drafted a remote worker policy that was, a couple pages in length. And then we actually came down to working with our team, just shorten it to hey, look, work with your supervisor or manager and figure out what works. In general, we want to be collaborative and in the office more than we're out of the office. But work with your manager, and if you get your job done, don't give your manager a reason to say no to working remotely. That's one of the ways in which we're working to address that, at least in the interim. But I know from peers, talking to peers and other clients, this is a challenge that they have. And so I would be game for connecting with this person offline, even if it's just email correspondence or even a phone call, to see how we might be able to where we might be able to be a conduit to help facilitate some of that peer-to-peer interaction, because I know that is a challenge that a lot of organizations are either facing or in the process of considering and trying to address as we speak. Awesome. So I guess that's a short answer. I'd love to collaborate with that person or connect with that person offline.
Awesome. And that's all the questions we have right now.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I can tell you, we're not trying to tell you how to run your medical practice by any means. We're just trying to be a place from which you can get information of things that we've heard from other clients of ours that are in the medical space, and then trying to give you maybe some ideas to consider or roadmaps to look at as far as if you're going to go down this path, what are the things that you might face and what are the solutions you might consider to solve some of the problems you might be addressing. So if there's anything we can do to help, again, please raise your hand. We'd be happy to at the very least have a conversation and see if we might be a good fit to help. If not, good luck. And we hope this information was valuable, and we look forward to seeing you on a future session. So have a great day and take care.